Today, in this session, we're talking with Fordham University Press, and we're talking about moving workflows online and how that is helping them to work in the remote world that we are at the moment. Today, I'm joined with Fredric, who is a director, and Richard, who is the editorial director. And I am Rodney, and we'll be talking through with these two lovely gentlemen about their processes and how they used to do things and how they are doing things now. So we'll have a quick look back of what they used to do, and then we're going to look at what the online acquisition process looks like now and why they're doing it. So Fred, do you want to start with what previously used to happen at Fordham?
Sure. So before we got Biblio Live, we were working with FileMaker as our house database, but that was only good up to a certain point. So a lot of the team, editors were keeping their own systems for tracking information, such as readers, list planning. We were each keeping our own lists. It was kind of disjointed and piecemeal. So we realized that we really needed an integrated, transparent house database that everyone could look at any moment and get information. What really drove the process was, marketing was really spending inordinate amounts of time in feeding data to our website or for Onyx feeds and to our distributor, Ingram, and it was just taking a lot of time. So that kind of drove the process to get a better database. So then Rod and I spoke at several conferences, could have been in previous AAUP, when it was the Association of American University Presses, and I kind of laid out the challenges at the press. So that has been great, and marketing is using the database. It's very streamlined, efficient. It's feeding to our website. It's great for data feeds. But then we realized we need to have a better system and a better workflow for editorial. For our board memos, our projects memos, our transmittal memos. A lot of this was all done through Word documents and just cutting and pasting, and it just didn't seem efficient. And when we had to pivot to all remote early COVID, back in April, March of 2020, it really forced us to go online and get a better system of sharing information. So I charged Richard with coming up with a great workflow to better streamline processes and workflows for editorial, and that has gotten us to this point. So we can then walk through what that looks like.
Sure. And so I guess, from that sort of, if I understand, you had some separate databases, perhaps with different people, having contact databases that no one else could see, the status of projects and where things were, was that was all done through sort of forms or, people writing down on bits of paper when you're having meetings, what the status is? Was there sort of a centralized way of reporting on that, or was it really just discussing in meetings?
Nothing centralized or unified. It was people working on different platforms, different software, Excel spreadsheets, lots of notepads, lots of stickies, lots of sticky pads, So, and I think it was also just the simple fact that we are a really small staff with limited resources, so we were just always really focused on just getting the work done right in front of us on the books themselves. So being able to have the capacity to step back and look at the larger picture, was always a bit of a challenge for us. Luckily, when we went into lockdown a little more than a year ago, we already had a cloud-based database, so we didn't have to worry about how do we access our database, remotely. That was not an issue, so basically we went from doing in acquisitions we would have different cover memos and different forms for different meetings, from our editorial projects meeting to our meetings with our faculty advisory board, transmittal meetings, marketing meetings, seasonal launch meetings, seasonal list planning meetings, and also tracking peer reviews. We were all doing this in a lot of different ways, and now it has become centralized in terms of the to be able to work on one database together and sometimes simultaneously. So now we're able to generate documents that we still need to generate for people who don't have access to our database, or don't need to have access to our database, but we have a lot more flexibility about how to prepare our data. But most importantly, we have a workflow that is unified, meaning we don't have to replicate the information or reproduce it in different forms each time we have the next meeting on a specific title.
You're very kindly showing us your setup of Biblio. So this is the new user interface. How do you find this? You're obviously one of the first early adopters for this. It's just been released. How does this user interface compare to what you had before?
I think improved. Yeah, it's a big improvement in terms of the ability to navigate the system. It's much easier and somewhat more intuitive. It is aesthetically more pleasing, but of course that also means as a result it is easier. Making it easier to read also makes it easier to navigate.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to go into today is one of your books, Richard, and look at the acquisition. So we've got here why the assembly disbanded. So we're looking at this as a concept of the IP or the work. And then for the purpose of your initial acquisition process, you're just working through with the paperback, and you can add other formats as you like. But if we click into here, we're taken to your dashboard. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what you start with and how you work with these?
Right. This is where an acquisitions editor, in this case me for this project, I would first start entering data once I knew I was going to be presenting the project to colleagues, and whether that was for discussion or for approval or for to move on to faculty board and contract approval. This may happen before peer review. It may happen after peer review, but this would be where I would enter in just the basic description of the project, the in-house description. I would start to build the data here in terms of the manuscript spec, the word count, number of illustrations, my projected pub season, if I'm comfortable enough to try to project one at this stage. But then also, if you look at the group subject panel, this is where I could assign BISAC codes, which feed out to our vendors, obviously. But also start to put in some things that are intended for internal use, like our catalog categories, when we do our list planning and catalog planning for seasonal catalogs. I can also track the status of the project here. I can enter subject categories, which will feed to our website and group this title with similar titles on our website for customers to be able to flip through and see what other related books they might be interested in.
Okay. And so you're doing this right from the start. So it's not just acquired titles. It's the title that you've just got a concept for, but you want to, build up a potential proposal for and have a list of projects that you might work through. And so then you're building up your information. You've got some general information here that you're putting in for the title. The comments, I know you said that you're going to start to use those more. That's, where you might have different people in the press commenting on a particular acquisition to leave thoughts on it. So it's time and date stamp. And then these biographies, So are you having to key these in every time, or do these synchronize from the contacts that are in the system?
Once an author or a peer reviewer has been established, and sometimes an author becomes a peer reviewer later, or vice versa, a peer reviewer becomes an author. If they're not already in our list of contacts, you create one, you assign them to the project through the role function, and in the marketing segment of the contact list, there is a text box for entering a biography, which can either feed out to our vendors or not, depending on the status of that, the status of the relationship with this contact. So and what it's connected to in terms of the work it's connected to.
Okay, great. And then I see here's some.
So then these will feed throughout the process.
Okay,
yes.
all right, great. So you've gone through, you've filled in some information here. You then are going into your editorial projects meeting, perhaps.
Right.
And why don't you talk a little bit about this side?
Great. Yes. So with this particular title, this is a project that I presented to the in-house editorial group 2 times. The first time was to make sure everybody was on board with this project, because it's not a very conventional academic project. It's not a traditional scholarly monograph. It's a bit of an art book. It's a bit of a poetry book. It's a theory of poetics book. But it's also a book about U.S. Latin America kind of political relations in the U.S. Mexico borderlands. So it has a visual component as well. So I wanted to bring it to the table for discussion before committing even to the author that I would send it out for peer review. And once everyone in-house said yes, agreed that yes, this is something we should send out for peer review, and it looks exciting and it would be a great addition to the list. So that's when I solicited the peer reviews. After I got the peer reviews, I then brought it back to the same meeting, the editorial projects meeting, as an approval item. So in this case, I had filled it in. This is the second version of that, of filling in the data for this. So I presented this back in January of this year for approval. In the process of working with the author, moving things forward with the author, I found out that there was the ability on his end to obtain a publication subsidy. So I have some information here about that. And then all this other information that you see below has been pulled from that initial dashboard. The acquisition description, actually not this is a related Fordham titles dashboard here, or panel here, that shows how this book fit in with other specific titles. So this is useful for marketing purposes in terms of thinking about, well, who is really the audience for this book? It might be the same audience that's read these books. And it also is a way to link these books again to this book to similar titles on our website. So again, when somebody pulls up this title on our website, they see these other titles that they may be drawn to, and will kind of click through and follow their way deeper into the press website to find out, that maybe they want to buy 4 or 5 books from us. Who knows? So, and then here you'll also see further down, we have, I do have some additional comments in here that I added for the editorial projects meeting specifically, which was just a little reminder that we had looked at it the previous summer, and we agreed I should send it out for peer review.
Okay. And I've got here, I know this isn't the exact layout that you have, but this is that sort of step where you've gone from an online system to needing to have it out in perhaps a form for someone outside, and you want to produce that. So again, sort of pulling out the data that's in the system, but formatting it into a document that you can use for other purposes without sort of having, fully key or copy and paste every component.
Exactly. It just pulls it into this template, and then that template, of course, is modifiable because it comes out as a Word document, and then you can save it in whatever format you like, obviously.
After our editorial projects, what's the next step?
Generally, if we have, in this case, when I brought this back the second time, everyone agreed that it looked good. The peer reviews were strong. We got the author response. The author response was really good to the peer reviews, and we agreed it was ready to go forward to our faculty board for recommendation of contract and publication. So that was the next panel, or that's the next dashboard that we have here. And again, at this point, I'm actually just kind of reviewing what is already here and making maybe some minor adjustments along the way. There may be additional comments that I want to make to my board that I didn't need to make to my colleagues, or vice versa. So I have a different additional comments field here that I might fill in that is specifically for my faculty board members to see. And generating a document from this dashboard is one of the most important ones, because our board members don't have access to our database, and they wouldn't want to have access to our database. We don't want them to, and they wouldn't want to have to log in and try to navigate our database just so they could, read my cover memo.
So that's that's this form.
Correct. Yeah.
So putting it out into a, excuse me, a format that they can read outside the system.
Right. And we would attach this to the peer reviews and the author response, and a sample from the manuscript and so forth, and the author's CV.
To the faculty board, as either a Google Doc or email attachment, so they're getting digital versions, and then they read them that way. So they have to look, good visually.
So then the next step is, you're doing a sort of contract request. So this is where you're then saying, okay, we actually want to generate a contract now. And so you've got sort of, I see here's a lot of the same types of information, but then you've got some extra pieces of data in here.
Right. Like the manuscript due date, royalty information, whether or not there are royalties. We generally have a standard, royalty rate that is understood. If we had something that was other than the standard, then we would enter that under the other notes section at this point. But again, this is already pulling in data from other fields, and this is simply just a way to capture this information that is useful in a way that it goes directly to our contracts manager as well as our business office.
So you've now requested the contract. It's now going for transmittal.
If only it happened this fast in the real world.
Well, that's right. This is the fastest acquisition ever. I love it.
Actually, yeah. Actually, once it got approved for contract, it happened very quickly. But because it is actually now well underway in production and design at this point. But the peer review process took a while. So yeah, once we get the final manuscript, we prepare it for marketing and production, and primarily for production, who may, some of our members in the production staff may be seeing this for the very first time. So it's very important that we actually have the manuscript specs available for them. And that's the purpose of this dashboard here. And it's meant primarily for our managing editor and our production and design manager. So they can start to become familiar with the project. They can, of course, also access all the other content at the same time. If they want to read more about, well, what is this book about? And is it an art book? And what does art look like?
Okay.
Which I think is really helpful for, let's say, Mark, our design and production manager. If he wants to start thinking about cover ideas, he can, he likes to know what the book's about, so he has a concept in mind. So having this kind of open, transparent database
Right,
is
right.
helpful.
And in this case, you'll see the thumbnail on the right hand of the screen. There is a piece of art. There's an illustration in there, and that is the agreed upon cover art for the book. It's not the cover, obviously, but it is the cover art, and there is information that is I can't remember which field you go to exactly, but the copyright information, the credit line, and everything
Yeah.
are all stored here. So
Yeah.
so we don't have to go chasing it at the 11th hour, saying, well, what's the credit line for this cover art? You know, it's all in there. Right.
Okay, and so you upload this, and then it's visible, and then once the cover art is complete, that will be replaced with the updated image.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Okay. So, all right. So then after that, you've then got a this one, the subsidies board. This is something that's growing, in an area that you're going to use more of. This is, currently, I guess, tracking subsidies is pretty manual, and you have to have a calendar item to make sure that the subsidy application's gone in, that you've been approved, the status, and that, once it has been approved and you've published a book, that you've invoiced for that subsidy as well.
Right. So again, building a subsidies dashboard in Biblio is really useful for, well, obviously for the acquisitions editors, but it's even more useful in terms of budget planning. Not just for specific titles, but for a season or a fiscal year. Our colleagues in the business office can access this information and find out, what invoices are coming in, which ones are which subsidies are coming in, which ones are due. Again, we put we have a place to put the proper acknowledgement language, so we know how to acknowledge this in the publication itself. If it's a subsidy that we've actually had to actively apply for, there are fields available for tracking that as well. I think we'll see some further development with this as we move further and further into this. But right now, up until now, in terms of Fred even submitting his annual report to the administration at the university, he sends an email to each of us and he's like, can you send me all the subsidies you received for the fiscal year? And then he tallies them up and so forth. And going forward, he won't have to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And those are really good things to show the administration, the subsidies that the press is receiving. So to be able to just kind of, do it on my own through Biblio would be great.
Then we have this new launch memo. And so now this is, I think, Fred, what you were talking a little bit about at the start is where, marketing were using the title management really well in Biblio, but now that acquisitions is having their workflow start the process, when it comes to launching into other departments, the majority of the information's there, but you're able to then, as people probably see, a lot of this information has been updated from the previous ones, but then down here, we're able to see some more information start to come in around sales and marketing. So, each department's interacting with the parts of the data that they need to add in for them.
It helps us with our sales team because we have to present to our distributor, Ingram, they're our distributor and our sales team, and it allows us to craft our presentations to the team. So the sales bullets is really useful because you only have a certain amount of time to present these books. So to have it, a concise description with bullet points and an author bio for the sales team is really key.
Previously, this was all about it being in multiple forms, but now being sort of centralized and having data flow through and update information. Now, I suppose that's really well and good, but for you, Richard or Fred, when you log in, you've probably got a couple of favorite reports or pieces of information that you want to have access to. And I know we've talked about a few of these before.
Right.
So we've got a seasonal list planning report.
Right. This is a report that I like to, or feel like we need to generate at least once a month to review what we have coming in-house as we're planning a publication season. What titles we anticipate getting in on time? Do we have too many? Do we have too many in one subject area? Do we have too many edited volumes and not enough single authored volumes?
Mm-hmm.
Are there projects that we need to push forward or some that we need to push back? So this allows this report, which it is my favorite report, and officially my favorite report. It allows me to generate this right here and generate it in a format that ranks the titles by their catalog category, meaning their level of importance in terms of their presence on the list and the sales potential and the marketing needs for each of these titles. And that would go from general interest to the lead academic to the scholarly. We also have a category for reprints and a category for distribution for titles that we may be distributing for other publishers, right? And some of those reprints will, they'll appear with our general interest titles, many of those, but they have a different set of needs, and so it's good to separate them out. But this basically allows us to once a month meet and discuss which titles are, again, which titles are coming into focus for the season. It allows us to kind of troubleshoot anything that we may see happening with titles that are critical for the list. It's like maybe it's gotten hung up in peer review and we didn't realize it until we're having this discussion. And what can we do to, try to expedite that process? Or we can look at the, the status of the project, that column on the far right here, and realize it's like, oh, this is, well, let's say just right now, for instance, we are about 3 weeks out from finalizing this particular seasonal list, the spring 2022 list. And I'm looking at some of these and I'm like, well, this one is still, well, actually there aren't any. Luckily, there aren't any. There are a couple where we don't have a status, but if I saw that something was still under peer review and it hadn't been approved, it hadn't gone to our editorial projects or our board for publication approval, and it's, and we're just 3 weeks out from closing our list, I'd say, we probably should plan to move this to the fall 2022 season.
Yeah. And so then, I see this report is in interactive format. And so, right. From there, you can click into the report and you can view, information about it. You could, potentially update the season that it's associated to, right. or whatever is relevant, and then go to the next one. And then when you run that report again, it will update with the appropriate titles that you want to keep in that series. Really appreciate you taking the time to show people how you have moved through and moved to online acquisition process and managing the data as opposed to sort of before. And hopefully that will help other university presses think about how they can become more efficient when they're working remotely.